Good morning and good salutations. From the free country that we call Canada, the home of the brave, is more secluded to themselves to know what kind of predicament the U.S. administration finds themselves in. Well, I'm not going to elaborate so much so, but we're here the contenders what we're talking about. All right, unfortunately, what we have a current administration with Biden and Kamala Harris, they're looking for their political ambition, which is honorable, but they don't know how the pecking order goes, right? Now, Biden, 81 years old, right, after 4 years, we know has come to his own pedigree. I know it's been a fast 4 years that have went by, but come this November, the enemies of our enemies south of the border, like Russia or Iran and other countries in South America, are asking the same question. What does it mean, and what does the House budget deficit, and that goes on about the U.S. servicemen and to keep the lights on in America? Well, it's a heavy price tag. Now, come November is what we have here. Okay, so who is the running mate to say? Is it Trump? Okay, as a Canadian, and Canadians know, we have the longest undefended border anywhere in this world, which is by right, they should be, because Americans know that being as much as our friend, so is our jobs. And our jobs are intertwined with the automotive sector and our goods and services to have the most undefended border. Why not? But since COVID, and during restrictions, we had a surplus of people coming from other nations that are not also NATO bound from Europe, such as Ukraine, and such as other countries that don't have a country to name of. Then somehow these people who are running from atrocity, asylum seekers, are looking for Canada as a new home. Which is good to say, but at the same time, there are issues pertaining to our safety and our sovereignty. And when it comes to our governance of our laws, including pandemic-wise, of people who are inoculated and those who are anti-vaxxers. Now, as you know, those breakaway republics from Russia to Iraq to Ukraine to South America to even Africa have to deal with certain things that they felt in Ellis Islands way back in the 1900s when they came from boats from shipping lines as stowaways. Now, because of emphysema, back in the hand, that was a deadly pathogen that has now been upgraded, right? We know that in Africa they have Ebola. We know that in China they have certain emphysema type of diseases that have elevated due to conditioning because of unavailability of the medicine that we have here now that are being taken away from Canadians ordinarily. Well, as we said, that's not allowable to say who would need those services. Most of all, Canadians know best. Now, because of the conditioning to say, well, does the U.S. have any hostile intentions? Listen to my friends. Canadians know you don't have a dual citizenship with Canadians who are more inclined to have doctrine with the Commonwealth. And because of that conditioning right now, the Commonwealth, with people moving from nation to nation with the Commonwealth passport, has put other Canadians in jeopardy to say how they have connections to Israel. And because the U.S. doctrine of supporting Israel unconditionally says a lot of those people running from Iraq to Syria to all those nations between Jordan and all those encampments. Now, those numbers are in the millions. So without any doctrine of saying how some people could use, and that way we knew the U.S. objection to keep the peace. Well, we have to ask after 93, when the first problems began with domestic terrorism, when the World Trade Center bombing happened with that van in 93. And what happened between 92 and 93, when Clinton realized what happened between that and after to budget his appropriate needs to say the 38 and the 32nd parallel line between northern and southern Iraq, and at that time the Yugoslavian War broke out, which is now called Herzegovina, which was also very interesting to know what age group I was 30 years ago. So now we have the influx of many service members that the U.S. would use as a appropriate needs to say, We will support those people running from the atrocity who had created themselves, to know what kind of price tag the first response of those people in the most parallel ways could be used in a way to say, hey, just like those Palestinians, to say, what home do we have to go to when it's destroyed by the size of those atrocities? So we have to ask ourselves, who would it benefit for Israelis to know that Iraq has become a no man's land of destruction, and all those people left in the middle? That's why we had almost 20 million people running. Now, after that aside, the farthest you would go to get to Europe would be the border area around Turkey. And anything south of Turkey, as a NATO obligated, they were asked by the government of NATO to participate to help Turkey and its allies. And at that time, we had issues with Armenia and Kurdistan to give them their own independence, to say, what can one country offer to other country they would need? So again, Turkey obliged, and NATO again went in there after, and again, after that came the destruction of that ability to not police those nations without using those atrocities of articles of war to condition of what happened to Israel. Now, through many, many years, we know that common sense prevailed, but if not, this is what happens. War breaks out, famine ensues, and then what have you not? The have-nots. So in Canada, we have to articulate articles of war before all hell breaks through. So, example, the contentious area of Ukraine, which is not NATO obliged, would be suffice to say what Finlanders would say, to concise, not appropriate, to say too appropriate, too close. But in order to make concessions, you have to relay back those ideas of how those countries connected to those other areas between Georgia, Armenia, and the breakaway star that connects to Russia, to all the way there. Those partners inlay known between Turkey and those are more related to their relations to say, Yankee, go home. We know why they say that. But regardless, those are obligations that they would say before Ukraine was adopted into NATO would be self-hypocritical of those countries before Ukraine was recognized to be entered to Ukraine as a legitimate NATO membership. And that's again, it comes to the Articles of War to make concessions. Now, because of U.S. and their obliteration and their deficit, the European Union made the Euro. To separate themselves, also intertwined the House in itself in England. And during Brexit, those people coming inlays, even the money that was sent to Europe to oblige those people to take care of their own backyard, didn't let people migrate to go to England in using the Brexit, and then Brexit was put a wall. At this time, we know Scotland and the south of that area of UK decided to become a bonanza of that shipping routes, and suddenly the vast interest didn't change things, but just complicated it. So now we're at the tipping point of the scale to say the U.S. House of Representatives does not have a House Speaker. The idea of many tiers of government from ATF, FBI, CIA, Homeland, the vast amount of resources and manpower gave the United States unscrupulous power to take what happened through 9/11 in 2001, to give them powers beyond the scope that the enemies of our enemies, to know that they couldn't filter any type of information that has to go through the databases, through the U.S. ports of e-commerce and everything else between that and the satellite systems that have those other companies like Apple, Google, all know what that means. It's a powerful information, right? And how that's inlaid. But would that mean the enemies of those stand and how encrypted services would help benefit those countries that would worry how the enemies would that to cripple them? What is irony after the fact is, when after what happened after Ronald Reagan and said, Gorbachev, tear down this wall, had greater implications what that meant when that wall came down, and how it ended up in civil war and almost destroyed a country in order to move it. Well, it worked in the U.S.'s plan to make them crippled in a way that they would cripple their economy. Now, how irony splits itself like an atom bomb. to know that U.S. is facing those exact circumstances, but not inlay, but the money that they can afford to keep their house bills on. This is Ajdan Karadenis signing out.